Greetings once and all. As we've discussed in the past, this is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. Thanks again for joining us on a rainy February 10th, 2015, or excuse me, 2018. Uh, Good day from Sweden. Enough respect, my Caribbean friend from Jamaica, walk wood. Um, at this point, my strategy today was to go live a few minutes earlier than normal. This gives me a chance to get some shout outs and say hello. And that way we can get started kind of right on time rather than have any delays occur because we're only on for about 20 minutes. I have some exciting items I wanted to cover today, and I'll also be doing some posts on it this week, which is rare that I haven't done so this week. Number one is we're kind of finishing up a duck curve discussion. The second thing we're moving into is there was a discussion of a teardown, and I've been having email contact with a couple of you regarding what is the teardown about? Is it a hatchet job on Tesla? Should owners be worried about it? And then the third thing that was kind of amazing is I had a random encounter with a gentleman who is I guess his brother or brother-in-law was at Tesla for 6 years doing mechanical engineering work and designing the casings for the batteries that go into the new Model 3. And so, it's another item that I decided I wanted to cover. Hello from Slovakia. Hi, Jan. Thanks for joining us. Um, Please feel free to shout out. I'd also like you guys, because you're early, to take some time out and fire questions. That way, after I get through my program for this week, I can dive into the questions that are most common or most interesting that might pop up. So, we're 5 people right now. We're just starting a agreed upon time. I'm going to give it about 2 minutes and then start the program for this week. And then once I'm done with, maybe a 5 to 10 minute program, we'll then go into Q&A and sort of cover whatever you guys think that is important for us to take a look at this week. So this is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. I want to thank you once again for joining us. As you know, if this is your first time on our channel, please take time to like and subscribe. If you're a return visitor or guest, please hit the bell icon and subscribe so that you won't miss anything. So the first part of the discussion today that I wanted to do is something I call Duck Curve 2. What Duck Curve 2 is about is the fact that J.B. Straubel chose to cover the fact that when you look at what the duck curve is, the problem that you run into, or that's starting to occur around the globe, is that, and I apologize if I delay because I'm sort of eyeing, who's contacting me and where they're from, and I definitely can see you in terms of your quotes, but I wanted to make sure I was aware if there are any questions that might have popped up on what we're discussing. So why the duck curve is a big deal, and it's sort of illustrated. I don't know if you guys have seen the big batteries that are being built right now in Australia by Tesla and other partners on behalf of the Australian government. But one of the most amazing parts of it is that in a few milliseconds, when the Tesla batteries detect that there's a shortage of power on the grid, those batteries will fire up by monitoring the grid and then instantly participate in providing a solution for electricity. So what I found interesting about the duck curve and why I think it's interesting and important to note is that if J.B. Straubel put up a chart that shows the trend towards the use of renewable energy that's going on in the United States. And basically what that trend line shows is that there are a number of locations that are being added to the list of places where renewable energy is being used as a critical portion of electricity being provided on the grid. So what this introduces is new problems. And as we know, the main problem it introduces is that if you have a situation where all of a sudden there's the sun goes down or giant clouds come over, you can instantly have a shortage of power that could create blackouts. And so the utilities end up having to fire up diesel or other types of generators to sort of power up the grid. And they don't want to keep running both of them at the same time because it's actually a waste of money. So by being able to use battery backup, you're able to bring power back onto the grid quickly until eventually those diesel generators are able to catch up. And so that's why the whole duck curve issue is a big one. And when you look at it in terms of how Tesla has solved those problems in different parts of the world, and even for, medium-sized companies, etc., there's an interesting phenomenon starting to occur, which is that utilities who didn't realize it are now having struggles relative to the duck curve that they didn't realize that they were going to have. And it's all part and parcel to the switch to renewable energy. So bottom line is that it's great that we're getting renewables onto the grid. It's great we're getting electric cars out there. But the challenge is that, this is creating new problems that people hadn't thought about before. Another ancillary problem is, I don't know if you guys saw this, but again, Australia, they're now creating 50,000 homes that will be connected so that you can end up having a virtual power station. And so as Tesla moves on to its next iterations, there'll be a situation emerging where Tesla will actually use your car and your home as part of sort of a new power plant. And so it's an interesting phenomenon. And as we've discussed previously, you can make the decision based on your car or your home storage of energy if you want to allow the utility to buy back that power on a temporary or not so temporary basis and at the price you want to use electricity when they have shortages going on. The next thing I wanted to cover briefly is the whole discussion of the teardown that went on. As you know, there's a individual who's a renowned auto person, and he did a teardown of the Tesla Model 3 in Detroit. And once he did this teardown, there's an interesting phenomenon that occurred, which is it was identified that their assessment of it is that there's about a Kia quality level that Tesla achieves in the case of the Model 3. And he was fairly unimpressed with the fit and finish, etc. of the Model 3. Now, I am fascinated because one of the challenges with that's going on with Tesla right now is, as you may recall, well, first of all, my viewer suggested that this was a hatchet job on Tesla. And, there are definitely folks that are trying to make Tesla's life miserable and put them out of business. But I have to say that one of the reasons I put on that the Model 3 is kind of a crappy car, especially in the beta test mode that we see it right now, is that Tesla tried to keep most of the production first with just employees and then with California-based buyers, etc. Why they did that was that to some extent the cars are somewhat in beta mode right now. And so one of the most amazing sort of exposures I've had to Tesla as a company is the fact that one of the engineers pointed out, one of the early engineers and longtime engineers pointed out that Tesla has a process where every 30 days there are numerous improvements that the car receives. They're instantly baked into the car. It's one of the sort of benefits of having 80% vertical integration. So in fact, most of the car is vertically integrated, i.e. being built by Tesla. So when you have this vertical integration situation going on, it results in the ability of the company to actually continuously improve everything that's being done. So this means that folks and viewers like you and I are really part of a network of folks that are helping Tesla identify issues with the car that should be modified, those tweets to Elon, as well as posts like this, where we identify and articulate issues that are being had with the car, are ways in which the car will improve. And don't be surprised to see improvements occur in a fairly quick time, like 30 to 60, 30 days or 60 days. One of my most exciting examples of this is I kept arguing that Tesla needed to provide rear seat uh, uh, Tesla needed to adapt a rear seat power, because there are a lot of parents or even individuals that are in the rear seats that might want access to uh, ways to power up their devices or be able to connect into the network and access Wi-Fi rapidly via the system built into the cars. So that change was made. In my last video, you'll see that there's a photo I took of rear seat power for passengers. And I really think that's an illustration of the responsiveness of Tesla to things that are highlighted that they think are an issue. Speaking of that, I wanted to say that I wanted to have you guys assist me in lobbying for what I call child jumper seats in the rear of the Model 3. You'll notice that there's plenty of room there to get, like a 2 to 5 year old in maybe a couple of jumper seats in the back. And I think that having that available would allow you to carry more passengers in the vehicle and kind of go from there. So I think that's another suggestion that I would make that I think needs to be addressed. So I do not believe that the teardown that occurred was a hatchet job or a conspiracy against Tesla. I think there's a lot of new improvements that can be done on the Model 3, and all of us are actually contributors to those improvements being made, and sort of your guidance is part of it. The last thing I wanted to cover today, and I'll probably cover it more in depth, is the fact that I ran into kind of the brother or brother-in-law of a Tesla engineer who worked particularly on the mechanical engineering side of the build out of the batteries for the Model 3. And there are a few comments that came out of that conversation that I thought were really interesting. The first comment was that what he explained was that the battery is half the cost but double the power. So there's been this hedging around about a 30% improvement, perhaps, that Tesla's engaged in with the new battery. And I have it from the horse's mouth that, in fact, yes, it is a new battery. Yes, the design work that's been done on it to deliver that new battery is pretty impressive in terms of what's been going on. I am kind of keeping my fingers crossed, because when you think about it, there's been a phenomenon going on where all anybody has been doing is grabbing batteries being used for laptops, producing them in larger numbers, and just sticking them in packs to be now used in iteration of vehicles. So they tried larger cells and they couldn't be cooled after supercharging very well. So then they went back to the smaller cells individually that might be in laptops. And so I was intrigued because I thought only the inside of the battery might be an issue in terms of things that Tesla might be working on, but nothing was left to chance in terms of modifying the exterior housing that relates to addressing every aspect of this being a phenomenal battery. A sidebar note that comes here is that I live in the United States, and I'm really worried about the future of GM and Ford and some of the other manufacturers that have a lot of jobs that depend on their success. And what I'm fascinated by is GM has been very dismissive about Tesla's battery being that big a deal, and that they can just buy what they need or have it designed and produced in Asia and shipped. I actually had an encounter with a lady on a plane going through Detroit, in fact, who was Korean, and she shared that she has a translation business, and this was probably 4 or 5 years ago, and basically she was translating manuals that had been produced at one of the at LG's factory, so that the U.S. engineers could understand the specs on the Korean batteries. And I thought it was fascinating because she made a very logical argument, slash GM was making a logical argument, which is the Koreans kind of invented, or Korean majors like Samsung and LG, et cetera, kind of invented the use of batteries when it comes to laptops, et cetera. They were being used. So if you're going to rely on anyone to produce a battery that would be superior, you really want to stick with the tried and true in the form of um, LG or Samsung or any of these folks. And the reality is that Tesla clearly has outdistanced even those who were sort of the world standard for battery production. So I kind of uh, have been, I've seen all of your hellos and I want to thank you for doing so. I also wanted to ask for you guys at this portion of the show, we have another 5 minutes. I wanted to sort of jump into questions you may have. One gentleman posed a question as to whether or not in New Zealand we're going to see, battery implementation consistent with what Tesla has done. And the answer I'm suggesting on that is I don't see why the implementation won't occur everywhere. And I think that the most enlightened countries are going to be the most aggressive about it. So as you'll notice, we haven't seen any Australian-sized implementations for batteries with Tesla, I'd say in the United States. I know in Southern California we have some activity going on, but I'm hopeful that we'll see very, very large-scale implementations like this all over the world because there's a strong need for what Tesla brings, what battery backup brings, what the ability to switch to renewables can do. I think is a big deal, and I'm hopeful that it's implemented more broadly. Um, I haven't seen other questions from you guys, so I think I'm going to jump into a little bit of my trucking post that I'll be doing in a day or so. So for this week's sort of trucking roundup, as you know, where we are with the trucks right now is there's a city called Sunnyvale, California, where the trucks are being developed. They're in what I call short mountain trials. So above the factory, there's a group of mountains that sit between Silicon Valley and the Pacific Ocean, and it's no more than maybe 1,000, 1,200 feet at the peak. But when it came to the original Tesla Roadster, there's a highway called 84, and that's what people were using in order to take, trips up into the mountains. And I think this is the most critical portion of sort of putting the new truck and its battery through its paces. So basically you have a situation where until the new factory is ready, which I think will be in another 6 months for the truck to move out of its Livermore facility, those that are in Sunnyvale and also in the mountains kind of above Sunnyvale there will see a lot of Tesla trucks with or without trailers being pulled that are rotating into those mountains. The process is to have the vehicle, be it a truck or the Roadster or whatever, on regular cycles with different engineers driving it, the vehicles are generating data that can be used to determine what needs to be fixed or modified or repaired. And so I think it's an interesting sort of where is the truck and what's going on with it right now. Another phenomenon is that you do have various current buyers and owners or future owners of those trucks that are doing ride-alongs to make sure that they introduce specifications that are consistent with what the marketplace needs. And, perhaps my last sort of discussion about the trucks for today is the fact that, as you know, Tesla has been very closed-lipped about what's going on with the trucks, because if you're not a buyer, they really don't want to tell you anything about it or introduce you to it aggressively, because there's a lot of really cool technology that's new that's been developed that Tesla does not want to share with others, but they're free to develop it on their own without them being able to just get it from Tesla free of charge. I think the truck is maybe the most important product in the last 100 years and will be for the next 100 years because the pollution impact difference it makes, the performance in terms of better fuel economy to get, etc., I think is huge. And I think it's a very important sort of implementation of what our future for all of us is going to look like. The final note that I'll be making on my truck piece this week is just the fact that there's an interesting phenomenon happen, which is it costs $1.5 million for a supercharger facility. And so if we're doing megachargers now and it's a small facility, one would assume that's about $5 million. Tesla makes a point, if you have 6 vehicles, Tesla will put a supercharger in for you. And so what's interesting to me is that a lot of the orders you've seen have been fairly large for the truck, which means the number of megacharger units installed, will be on the higher side because they know what they're going to be using over time. But I've been fascinated to watch some of these people talk about ordering 1 or 2 vehicles and expecting to be able to mega charge those vehicles. And I'm kind of suspicious of those very small orders, because if you have a facility that costs $5 million and you only bought 2 trucks, which means you've spent $300,000 or perhaps $400,000 for trucks, and then $5 million, to provide electricity to them, I don't think that makes any sense. So I just generally think that the number of trucks that people are buying, they're not really saying the real numbers from a competitive standpoint. So I think that's about it for today. I would love to have any questions that you guys might have that have popped up based on viewing us. Again, reviewed Duck Curve 2. We also covered the teardown, sort of bad news on the Model 3. And then finally, we sort of looked at, sort of the latest on trucks or latest developments. I just want to say greetings to the Netherlands, Dubai, Slovakia. I want to thank you all for taking time out once again to spend some time with us. This is Greg for Tesla Fan Insight. We could definitely use your support on Patreon to do a better job in everything that we do. If you please like and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. You can send email to admin@teslafaninsight.com. And, again, we're all a community sort of helping to bring forward the EV revolution. So we all got to chip in. All of your suggestions for Tesla's improvement is part of what goes into making the car great that we all get to enjoy. And it also goes into facilitating the impact on our world and our society that's a little bit stronger and that makes a huge difference. So thanks once again for joining me. Have a great day and look forward to our conversation next week. And also look forward to your emails of things that we should cover that you think are important.